Hello everyone, so I was looking at some forums today and I noticed that some people are struggling sending virtual instruments out to multi-channel outputs, and then obviously with the intent of either processing each thing separately. When I mix, or when I produce I should say, I tend to print the multi-track outputs of any virtual instruments that I'm using, just so I've got everything as a WAV file, or AIF depending on how I'm approaching things. So let's go over to the computer and have a look at how you configure various outputs. I'm going to use SSD as an example. I think it's more or less the same in Contact. I'm demonstrating on Mixbus 3.7, I think. But the principle is the same. In Pro Tools there's a slight difference in that you can only route the first two outputs from a multi-channel output virtual instrument to the same channel, which is annoying, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Right, cool. Over to the computer. So we're over at the computer now and I'm in Mixbus version 3.7, I think. I have some MIDI here which we're going to pipe through our drum synth in a moment, or a virtual instrument. Now, first up, as I say, this theory is applicable to all DAWs, although some of them have tiny little quirks in the way they work. So you'll notice that I don't use stereo outputs 1 and 2, or stereo output 1 I should say, outputs 1 and 2 from SSD, because I want it to be sort of cross-compatible with Pro Tools. And it's really annoying in Pro Tools that when you set up a virtual instrument, as far as I know, the first two outputs always go to the sort of channel that it's on. So unless they've changed that in version 12, which I haven't really had a proper play around with, then it's the case. So that's why I don't use stereo output 1 on SSD, because I want this to be cross-compatible should I need to take it over to a Pro Tools machine. So first up, I create a new MIDI track, one new MIDI track, add. Now Mixbus does this thing where it asks you about the setup of the plugin, so I'm going to say I want 24 channels, and you'll see why in a moment. So here we go, we've got 24 channels here. If I go into the mixer window and we have a look on the pin connections by right clicking on the plugin, you'll see there's 24 outputs coming from the plugin. So first up, I am going to load in a kit. Let's just go Deluxe Rock 3, and it's loaded in. Now you'll notice everything's coming out as a stereo mix. Now that's not what we want, because we want to be able to split these drums apart as if it were a real multi-track drum recording. So first up, I'm going to go into the mixer window. Now I usually... SSD is annoying in one way, because the mono outputs are after the stereo outputs, which is, to me, seems bizarre. But let's set mono outputs on the kick drums and the snare drums. So I'm just using outputs 9 for the kick, output 10 for the snare. I'm going to set all the toms to output on output stereo 2, which in our case we actually want to think of as outputs 3 and 4. You'll see that in a minute. The hi-hats I'm going to set to stereo 3. So all my cymbals I'm just going to put out with the overheads. You could split these up even further, so you could have a cymbal spot output. But for the sake of this, I'm just doing that. And then room onto output 4 stereo. Cool. Okay, so now I want to create some new outputs. So I know that I need 2 mono outputs, and I want them to be audio tracks because I want to be able to print on them. So I've got 2 mono outputs. So let's rename them, not remove them. Kick. Let's make that capital K. Kick. And snare. Okay, cool. So next we want 3 stereo outputs. So 3 stereo audio tracks, sorry. And again, as I say, we have to use audio tracks because I want to print these. So the first one was toms. Second one was overheads. And the third one was room. So we've got all our inputs. So let's just see what happens if I go into grab mode and I drop this MIDI track onto the SSD track. Well, it's playing, but we're not hearing anything. And why is that? Because we haven't set up our routing yet. So all we do is we go into the routing audio connections manager, which is Control N. On other DAWs, you may just need to go to the the input on each channel and prime it to record. So I've got this SSD out, which is all my outputs from SSD. So if we zoom in a little bit, there we've got all our inputs here, and we've got all our outputs from SSD. So I want to start at kick. I want to start at toms, and I want to start on numbers 3 and 4 because remember I missed number 1 and 2. I start at toms 3 and 4, and then I'm just going to fill in those outputs. So we should have output stereo 4, which was our room. So there we go. So we've got 1 and 2, which would normally be which I've left out, and then obviously stereo 2 is 3 and 4, stereo 3 is 5 and 6, and stereo 4 is 7 and 8. Okay, so where is the kick and the snare going to? Well, they are going to coming from numbers 17 and 18. I know that because SSD has 8 stereo outputs, so that's 16 channels of output, and then we just want these 2 here. Okay, so there we go. Now if I play back and make sure everything is on input mode here, then we should see the drums split across all of these channels. There we go, as if by magic. So then obviously, if you want to make a print, you just set everything to record, and you can do this for removing processing power. You might want to freeze a track essentially, just print out what you've got, or just to be certain that you're progressing with your production and you're not tempted to go back and tweak stuff even further, because that's the one thing that really kills a record: eternal tweaking and never bringing it out. So I'm just printing now. So there we go. I won't let that run for the full length, but I can then go into this channel. I can disable SSD, and I can put everything on disk playback. Wahahaha. And now we have multi-track drums playing back that are individually adjustable. So if I want more or less kick, I can control that. If I want more thump just on the kick, for instance, I can do so. I can solo things out. And the good thing about this is, you know, it feels like multi-track drum mixing, but you have complete control and there's zero spill, so you can really spank the drums with compressors and so on. Let's just show you that with the snare. I'm just going to do a stupid amount of compression. I'm going to use the makeup gain here. I mean, the notion of actually doing that amount of compression on a live kit, you know, you would have a lot of the spill being compressed. So that is how to select multiple outputs for a virtual instrument. As I said, it differs slightly from DAW to DAW, and remember that in Pro Tools, outputs 1 or 2 tend to not be, you can't send them to another audio track, which is really annoying, because obviously if you want to print that, then that's a pain. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed that, I hope it's useful, and I will see you next time. Happy recording.